Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be ranking each and every episode of Invincible, seasons 1 through 4, along with the Adam Eve special. So, right before I get right into the tier list, I do want to mention I do have a Kickstarter. It's only got 37 hours to go. It is for a $1 tabletop RPG. And again, it's only got 37 hours. We have met our goal, which is great. Now, this is a Kickstarter exclusive project. What that means is you can only get this on Kickstarter and only for the next 37 hours. So, if you want a copy, it's only $1, but you got to grab it soon because when it's off the market, it's off the market, and I'm not making more. So, grab a copy while you can. And now that that's out of the way, we're going to get right into the video. All right, I'm going to do this in chronological order. So I'm going to start with Season 1, Episode 1, It's About Time. All right, I'm going to give this one, I'm going to put this in solid. I would say this is definitely a solid episode. Obviously, it's kind of just setting things up. You know, we see the Guardians of the Globe and Nolan, right? So it's just kind of setting up the world, setting up at that time, Mark doesn't have his powers. So it's more of a setup episode. Now, of course, at the end, you do have Nolan killing off the Guardians, and there's that mystery of why did he do it. You know, so I would definitely say a solid first episode. Now we're going to move on to episode 2. And for this one, I'm actually going to put this one in okay. In this one, the Flaxans invade, and just seeing the effect that it has on Mark. We also get to meet Alan the Alien for the first time as well, along with I believe the name is Team Teen. So this one, it's okay. Again, it's kind of setting up, although it's not quite as exciting as the first episode. It's okay. It's not bad, but not as good as the previous episode, in my opinion. All right, next up is season 1, episode 3. I would say this is actually another solid episode. In this one, Doc Seismic appears. We also see, we see the Mahler twins once again. This one is solid. It's not the most memorable episode. I'll be the first to admit it, but it's solid. It's definitely more exciting than episode 2, and it manages to set up a couple of new plot points, while again always keeping a couple of action scenes here and there, some suspense to kind of keep you engaged. So this one's solid. All right, next up is season 1, episode 4. Neil Armstrong, Eat Your Heart Out. And this one is going in okay. For Mark's first space adventure, it's not as exciting as I was hoped it would be. I wouldn't call it boring. I wouldn't go that far. But Mars just wasn't as exciting. Cecil learns about Nolan and some of the shady things that are going on behind the scenes, which is pretty interesting to watch. And to me, that's one of the highlights of this episode. But I would just say this one is it's okay. But now we're gonna move on to season 1, episode 5. And this one, I'm actually gonna put this in. It's our first masterpiece. Personally, I really like this episode. I really like the way they handled Titan as a character. Seeing the struggle he kind of grows up around, seeing the toxic cycle he's in, just kind of being Machine Head's grunt. Machine Head pretty much telling him, hey, listen, I own you. So I liked pretty much everything they did with Titan. Even Machine Head, he's a pretty entertaining villain, on all honesty. His, I think it's like auto-tuned voice or whatever, is just very entertaining to listen to. We also see in this episode, Mark almost dies. Gets pretty brutally beaten up. All in all, this to me is a masterpiece. It's a fantastic episode. It's one that I will revisit every once in a while. It's the first masterpiece, but definitely not the last of the series. But now we're going to move on to episode 6 of season 1. And this one, I'm going to put actually in great. While not quite a masterpiece, I do think this was a great episode. I liked the sort of body horror, way, the body horror-esque kind of, I'm not even trying to express it, but just seeing how, I forget what his name is, like St. Clair, whatever his name is, but just seeing what he puts the people who become Reaniman through, the horror, it's just it's messed up, but it's also kind of engaging. Adam Eve starts doing some humanitarian efforts, which I actually personally like. I know some people think it's kind of boring, but I actually like it. I think it's a good part of Adam Eve's character arc. Um, Robot heals Monster Girl as well, and so I personally, again, not everyone likes that subplot, but I do, and I liked its screen time. So, but to me, really, the Reaniman, that's the highlight. Again, the body horror aspect, even if I suck at explaining it, I really found engaging. So I think this is a great episode. And then next up is season 1, episode 7. And this one, I actually just rewatched this one last night. I think it's a masterpiece. I think this is a great episode. From pretty much beginning to end, there's this like feeling of tension. Because one, you don't know exactly why Nolan is doing what he's doing, but you just know that he's not afraid to kill pretty much anyone who's around him. It's pretty much Omni-Man versus the world. And so that feeling of tension is just so strong in this episode, and it's great. The conversation between, Nolan versus, Cecil. I can't believe I almost forgot his name. But, that conversation they had where it's like Cecil can't actually hurt Nolan, but he can kind of try to talk him out of what he's doing, And then the tension of, is Nolan going to grab him or is Cecil going to teleport just in time? Seeing him have that tie in his hand where it's like he almost got him. So an exciting episode, a very emotionally engaging episode from start to finish. I really enjoyed this episode. And then next up, the season 1 finale, Where I Really Come From. This is one I've gone back and forth on, in all honesty. But you know what? I'm going to put it in masterpiece. This is one where I wasn't really that big of a fan the first time I'd seen it, second time, but it's very much grown on me. Now for some people, this episode has too much violence. The violence is too gratuitous, but what I've come to understand is, and why ultimately I'm one of the people who really likes this episode, is the violence serves a purpose, right? It shows at this point in the timeline, the fundamental difference between, Nolan, as Omni-Man, and Mark as Invincible. Their value of a human life, it's just, they're on different levels. And that's what this episode does a fantastic job of displaying. It's great. So, again, I've gone back and forth, but as it stands right now, I think this is a masterpiece. I've really enjoyed this, and I think it's a great finale to season 1. All right, now we're jumping into season 2. And episode 1 of season 2, I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's a really, really, really good start to season 2. I really, Angstrom Levy, I like what they do with that character. And I like how, as much as he has this big dream of getting all this knowledge from different, dimensions or whatever, he doesn't want to build his empire in blood. And he's willing to basically throw away his dream just to save Invincible's life. I really liked that. And obviously there's the fallout of that and the consequences. But to me, the real gem of this episode is just kind of the fallout and the after effect of what happened between, Omni-Man and Invincible. Seeing how that affects, Mark, his mom, just the entire world, just how they're affected and kind of shook by the events of season 1. It's great. It's great. Really, really, really like it. Even on rewatch, it's great. It makes you feel like the events of season 1 really mattered. So, yeah, I think this episode is a masterpiece. Next up is season 2, episode 2. And this is going to be our first meh. I think this episode, I'm not really a fan of it. It's not trash. It's definitely watchable. But it's definitely not, to me at least, it's not good. And it's one on rewatch I tend to try to skip if I can. Or if I watch it, there are exciting moments, no doubt, which is why it's non-trash. And there are a couple of interesting moments here and there, but personally, I just find this to be really meh. I thought that like Atlantis would be more exciting than it actually was, but again, just just meh. That really to me like sums up how I feel about this episode. So we're gonna move on to season 2, episode 3, and I'm going to put this one. Yeah, I'm gonna put this one in solid. I definitely do think this is a solid episode and much better than the previous one. In this episode, the Coalition, kind of debuts. Also, at the very, very end, there's just kind of the cherry on top where, Omni-Man returns in the sense that, Mark is kind of tricked into going to Thraxa. I personally really liked how that played out. Even when the Thraxan kind of pretended to be the one superhero from Mark's comics, and Mark didn't believe it for a second, and you as the viewer are wondering, all right, is that actually the character? Is he being tricked? And turns out he was being tricked. So, I mean, there's other stuff that goes on in this episode as well, but I'd say this is a solid episode. With, again, to me, the highlight being the whole beginning of that Thraxan saga. But now I'm going to move on to episode 4. And this, to me, is a masterpiece. Once again, I personally really enjoyed this episode. I mean, pretty much Mark has to see how his dad, in a way, has kind of moved on from him. Not entirely. He's not being cold towards Mark, but he's moved on. They have to defend the planet from the Viltrumites who pop up. And it's our first real view of how the Viltrumites are, especially when dealing with their own. And just seeing how brutal they are. It's just, oh man, it's great. It's great. It's terrifying and it's awful, but it's also from a viewing perspective very engaging. There is also the subplot with Donald, how he's kind of freaking out because he's seen himself die. I actually really enjoy that subplot, especially on rewatch. So all in all, I would say this episode is a masterpiece. I really enjoyed it. But next up is episode 5. And I'd say episode 5 is solid. This is a solid episode. In this episode, the Lizard League, appears, and the bloodshed that goes on over there. That definitely is the highlight of the episode, among other things. There is also the thing with Alan the Alien as well. That's the first time I saw season 2. I wasn't too interested in that subplot, but I liked where it went, and upon rewatch, I like it. Even from the very beginning, I like it. So yeah, this is a solid episode. Borderline great, actually, I'd say. I know a couple people don't like this episode, but I'm definitely not one of them. So solid, kind of borderline great, but just it's not quite there for me personally. All right, next up is episode 6. And I'd say this is also another episode that is just, it's solid. Not quite great, but it's a solid episode. Mark actually taking the time to look into Nolan's sci-fi novels was pretty cool. Oliver gets adopted by Debbie, which is also really nice. This is a solid episode with a couple of little plot points that I personally kind of really like. I could see somebody not being the biggest fan of this episode, but yeah, I really liked it. But not as much as I liked the next episode, which is season 2, episode 7. I'm just gonna be honest. I think this is a masterpiece. I really like this episode pretty much from start to finish. I like how Rex is just sort of like. He found himself in this rut, so he goes back into the field and fights this one, like, octopus monster or whatever, and he's just kind of getting over having his mechanical arm or limb. I forget how much of his, whether it's his arm or his hand, but having that little arm cannon, that was a pretty cool scene. But just seeing Rex adjust and seeing Rex and Invincible interact, I really enjoyed, especially on rewatch. Mark trying to make time for Amber and just trying his best to make it work. I definitely feel bad for him, and it's engaging because Amber's also trying to make it work. So seeing them kind of try to make it work, and then, the narrative doing a great job of using Anissa, maybe I might be mispronouncing that, but using her to kind of show the audience and Mark that, Amber, as long as she's with him, is never going to be safe. In general, Anissa, she is the highlight of the episode, in my opinion. You know, for a number of reasons. Seeing her just one shot that one giant sea monster was great. But also the fight versus her Invincible, where he just did not stand a chance. You know, uh, again, I think this episode has a lot going for it, with her really being the highlight. Along with, again, Mark and Amber realizing that the relationship, it's not that it wouldn't work, but it's just so dangerous. Amber kind of wants to just kind of pursue something that's safer, which is understandable. I mean, if you're with a superhero, then your life is in much more danger. So I personally really like the way that kind of played out. But again, not the highlight. So again, I've talked too long about this episode, but I really enjoyed it. But next up is the finale, season 2, episode 8, and I think this is a great episode. I loved how we got glimpses of like the multiverse through this new and twisted, Levi Angstrom. I was terrified and it upset me, but he's a villain, so he should. Just seeing how morally messed up Angstrom is in this state, along with the PTSD that he has. I mean, he's more than willing to just like break Debbie's arm, and I mean, he really has become a full on villain. You see it, and he's just kind of tormenting Mark. So when he finally is, when he finally kicks the bucket, for me, you don't really feel bad for him because you just see how messed up he is, and just how basically, there doesn't seem to be any lines he won't cross to get to Invincible, even if it means hurting Invincible's mom, who is, for all intents and purposes, completely innocent in all this. So, yeah, I think this is a great episode. Just seeing the effect that having to end Angstrom had on Mark, the psychological toll. I liked the whole cameo with the Guardians from a future, from like a different dimension or whatever. Unless, of course, they were the ones from that timeline. I mean, it gets confusing. But point is, I think this is a great episode and a great end to season 2. So now we're going to get into season 3. And I think season 3, episode 1, I think it's okay. I think it's fine. Again, it's kind of more so worried about kind of setting things up. There's also the whole Cecil and Mark are kind of butting heads, which kind of started in season 2 and has kind of gone on. And we also see Doc Seismic once again. This is an okay episode. It's more so setting up for the episode that's coming up. But it's okay. It's definitely not a meh episode. But again, it spends a lot of time setting up for the next episode, season 3, episode 2. And speaking of that episode, I would say this is a masterpiece. I really enjoyed this episode. Just seeing how Cecil, again, morally, I mean, not unlike Angstrom, Cecil just doesn't have a problem with crossing all sorts of lines, including installing a device in Mark's head, which was really messed up. Upon first viewing, I was kind of scared, when it came to the Guardians, and I wasn't sure whose side they were going to take, but I liked the way it played out, and they ended up actually breaking up, and it just in general, I like the way this episode handles the conflict. So, again, episode 1 walked, so this episode could run. I really enjoyed it. But next up is season 3, episode 3, and I would say this episode is great. Again, I enjoyed this episode quite a bit. This is, in this episode, Oliver actually kills the Mahler twins. And it's pretty interesting seeing, Invincible kind of explain to him, like, we can't just kill like that. And just saying, Oliver, he doesn't have that strong, like, moral code that Mark got from Debbie, which also rubbed off on Nolan. But Oliver, at least at this point, doesn't have that. It's very interesting seeing that. And there are a couple other things that go on, but again, I actually enjoyed this episode quite a bit. Next up is season 3, episode 4, and this one I'm going to put, surprisingly, and great. This is an episode I didn't think I'd like it. I within the first 5 minutes I was like, I'm gonna hate this, and I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Mark is kidnapped and taken to a future where he has to kill like a mortal man who's become the king of that future. And honestly, I found it a lot more interesting than I thought I would. There's also, the goings on with Nolan and Alan the Alien. Eventually they're able to break free, and we get the very interesting reveal that the Viltrumites. I mean, there's not that many of them. I think he says 40, 50, 60, whatever. But all in all, I think this is a great episode. Honestly, again, when I first watched it, I didn't think it was going to be good, but the writers managed to pull it off, and I'm impressed. Definitely a great episode. Next up is season 3, episode 5, and I would say this is a solid episode. I wouldn't say it's great or anything like that, but again, I enjoyed seeing Titan kind of reappear and seeing how now that he's no longer under the heel of Machine Head, kind of seeing how he runs things, learning about the Order, and that one, I forget his name, but he's able to turn to a dragon. The dragon fight with him versus Invincible, very entertaining. Again, I definitely say this is like a solid episode. All right, now we get into the season 3, episode 6. And I'm going to put this in Masterpiece. Man, did I love this episode. Oh, man. Whew, I love this episode. I remember when I first watched this episode, I ended up rewatching it immediately after because, man, oh, do I love this episode. This episode revolves around a character named Powerplex. And really, the idea behind Powerplex is what happens when someone becomes so obsessed with revenge that it pretty much consumes them. And that's Powerplex. He's just so obsessed with revenge that it consumes him. And it's sad to see. It's sad to, first of all, the tragedy that happens to him is sad to see. It really is. But just seeing how he pretty much proceeds to kind of let what happened to him define him in the worst of ways, and pretty much let it ruin his life. And the worst part is when he makes, the vengeance consumes him so much that he then kind of, towards the end, dons a victim complex where now he's doing things and he's killing people and he's responsible for certain things and blaming Invincible, saying, look what you made me do. It's like, no, you did that. You made the choice. They agreed to this horrible plan that you guys never should have done. You got to take responsibility for it. It's sad to watch, but it's kind of a cautionary tale in a way. And that's what makes this such a masterpiece of an episode. Because, any of us could become Powerplex. Not in terms of his power, but in terms of the path that he kind of, falls down. Any of us have the potential to kind of fall down that path, just depending on our environment, if maybe we don't have the right people in our lives pushing us in the right direction. So, yeah, it's a masterpiece. I really, really enjoyed this episode. But next up is Season 3, Episode 7. And to me, again, this is also a masterpiece. Seeing the Invincibles from different dimensions just kind of wreck house on Earth is just, again, terrifying, but again, as a viewer, very, very interesting. It's also kind of one of the best parts about this episode is it's a reminder if all of these Invincible variants who are like half Viltrumite, if they're doing all this damage to Earth, imagine how much damage the full Viltrumites would do. I mean, it's terrifying to think about. But it's just a preview. It's a hint at the damage that like the Viltrumites could do if they got to Earth. Again, a bunch of half Viltrumite multiverse variants, and man, they just wreck shop. It is ridiculous. So again, I really enjoyed this episode. Definitely masterpiece. And then finally, Season 3, Episode 8. Masterpiece. I think that Conquest is a great villain. I think it's having Conquest, arrive on Earth and just I mean, no one can really stop him. And it's just, he's a great finale villain. He's a great finale villain. Yeah, there's mostly action in this episode, but it's great action. And it's very story relevant. And Conquest as a character, I really like. I like the fact that he essentially confesses how he feels to people, the sort of emotions he buries right before he's planning on killing them, right? Because he's emotionally suppressed and he has all these emotions he wants to express. But like Nolan, he's a victim of a bad culture. So he's not comfortable bringing these feelings up to his fellow Viltrumites because they're gonna look down on him. Look down on him, and also, they're afraid of him anyways because of the violent things he's done and just what he's capable of doing. So I actually feel for him in a way. So again, masterpiece. Really enjoyed this finale, but now we're gonna jump into season 4, episode 1. And I'm going to say this first episode is solid. I like this episode quite a bit. I like this episode, Mark is kind of struggling with his urge to kill, to protect the ones that he loves. And he does eventually, the Sequids do return. And I actually like the way they return quite a bit. I like how they returned and, Cecil, they were actually ready for it. They had a backup plan to the force field or whatever. And yeah, Mark ends up killing a guy who is innocent, although he's being used by the Sequids. So, I like that a lot personally. You can see it's having a really bad psychological effect on Mark. So yeah, I think it's a solid first episode. All right, next up is season 4, episode 2. I think this episode is a masterpiece. I thought it was really nice seeing the backstory for Nolan. I never thought we would, and I never thought I'd feel bad for him. But after seeing his backstory, I mean, whew, man, what one heck of a backstory. So yeah, I think this episode, I mean, among other reasons, is a masterpiece. It's also nice seeing how far Nolan has come from where he used to be. So yeah, I personally really enjoyed this episode. Next up is season 4, episode 3, and I'd say this is a great episode. I really enjoyed this episode. The Flaxons return once again, and it's interesting how they get stronger each and every time. Monster Girl and Robot actually end up getting stuck on the other side, which I didn't expect. I thought they'd come back immediately or figure out some sort of plot armor way, but no, they're stuck over there. So I actually was really impressed with that. Titan returns once again, and he has Oliver, protecting him. So, yeah, I think this was a great episode. I really enjoyed it. Again, honestly, more than I thought I would. Next we go to season 4, episode 4, Herm. Who named this? Herm. All right, best episode of the show. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it's a masterpiece. The social and political commentary in this episode is just fantastic. I mean, this right here, Herm is peak television, or peak streaming, whatever you want to call the show. Herm is just it's so good. In fact, it's so good that I'm actually going to put it over here in meh, because it's misunderstood. It's secretly a masterpiece, but, the world's not ready for it, so it's going to go in meh. All right, jokes aside, trolling aside, this episode is... See, a lot of people, they say this episode's bad, trash. I wouldn't go that far. However, one thing that has been said that is true is Herm is the worst episode of Invincible. And I have to agree. Herm is the worst episode of Invincible. I don't think it's bad, but I do think it's the worst episode of Invincible, for sure. There's just no getting around it. So, yeah, sorry, Herm, but you are the mehest meh that I've ever seen. All right, next up is season 4, episode 5. And, oh yeah, this is a masterpiece. Really enjoyed this episode. So Omni-Man returns back to Earth, something I've been waiting for since, like, the end of season 1. He returns back to Earth and seeing the fallout of that. Later on, we get a Conquest rematch, versus Invincible versus Conquest, which is again, I kind of hope I'd never see it just because I was terrified for Mark because he barely survived the last one, but he does manage to defeat Conquest, although at a great price. So I think this is a masterpiece. I really enjoyed this episode quite a bit, And next up, I'm moving on to season 4, episode 6. This is an episode no, it's definitely not going in meh. It's going in great. This is an episode, I did not think I'd like this episode. I didn't think I'd like it. But I did, quite a bit actually. Seeing Oliver and Omni-Man spend time together, it's actually really entertaining. You kind of see how Nolan kind of grows on Oliver. It's nice to see, and you get to see, Nolan trying to be a better person. Again, he comes from a bad culture, and he's just trying to just de-indoctrinate himself and just be, in a human in a sense, and just be empathetic and actually be a father for Oliver. So I actually really enjoyed this episode. Again, a lot more than I thought I would. I thought it was going to be pretty boring, but great episode. Borderline masterpiece, honestly. All right, and then next is season 4, episode 7. This episode is trash. Battle Beast did not get enough screen time. I am unsubscribing from Invincible. I did not enjoy it. All right, next up is no, I can't leave it there. No, it's definitely a masterpiece. Man, Thrag. Oh my God, Thrag. Oh, when I watched Invincible, nobody told me about Thrag. I missed it. Around when people were talking about Thrag, I wasn't on social media. I was just too busy doing, IRL stuff and, bills and, living life and all that. Mostly just boring stuff. So I missed the Thrag train. Oh, man. I actually thought they were going to just, I thought they were just going to body Thrag. I saw his corny haircut and I was like, man, somebody smack this man. Smack the mustache off of him. I want him to get bodied. Man, was I wrong. Oh my God, my heart watching this episode. Oh, my heart. Oh. I mean, I knew Thrag was going to be tough, but this episode, especially on first viewing, oh, man, Thrag is just relentless. He doesn't spare anybody. Oh, man. Just Thrag's presence. I mean, obviously they do, they destroy Viltrum, which is pretty cool. But let's be honest. We all know the highlight of this episode is Thrag. I mean, bro is literally in the corner airbending and punching people outside of the atmosphere. Man, Thrag is easily the highlight of not just this episode, but the whole show. And even, again, masterpiece of an episode. All right, now there's only 2 more left. There is the finale, and then there's the Adam Eve special. I'm going to put the finale in great. This is an episode, I kind of didn't like it at first, but it kind of grew on me. I didn't like how it's like, oh, this horrible thing is happening. Oh, it's all in Mark's head. I found it annoying at first, but it kind of grew on me because, I mean, he's just freaking out because of what Thrag did to him in season 4, episode 7. I mean, honestly, if I had to deal with Thrag, I'd be feeling PTSD too. So, great episode. Definitely grew on me. That last sequence, I wasn't sure if it was a dream sequence or not. But no, apparently it's real. So Thrag's on Earth now. I mean, I don't know what kind of secret life he's living or whatever, but, in the Invincible universe, somebody out there is secretly Thrag. Do not piss them off. You do not want to piss Thrag off. So, yeah, it's great. I grew on me quite a bit. Next, and then last is the Adam Eve special, which I actually really enjoyed this quite a bit. Truth be told, before I saw the Adam Eve special, I didn't care about Adam Eve. I just could not care less about the character. But the Adam Eve special made me actually care about the character. You know, seeing her backstory and whatnot, and you know just how messed up her tweens were because of, you know, essentially the people who were around when she was born, kind of re-entering her life. You know, it hit. I really, really enjoyed this. And again, it actually made me care about Adam Eve quite a bit. So, yeah, masterpiece. And, I mean, that is pretty much it. As you can see, you know, Invincible, you know, with the boys, there were a lot of, like, you know, solid and great episodes. But as you can see with, you know, Invincible, at least in my opinion, Invincible has a lot of masterpieces. There are a lot of episodes in here. You know, and we've got a good amount of them from season 1, a good amount from season 2. Season 3 has the most of them. But again, every season has a good amount of like masterpieces, which to me is a sign that the show is it's doing very well, you know. So again, Invincible as a show honestly grew on me. You know, I like season 1 and I like season 2. But really, starting around season 3, it really grew on me, and I actually start to really care about certain characters. Seeing certain things happen to them, it's just like, oh man, I'm now attached to these characters, even though I didn't want to, you know. So again, Invincible as a show. Again, I only think there's 2 meh episodes and 3 okay ones. I think the show does a good job of delivering episodes that are the bare minimum solid, but often masterpieces. And I definitely do think these are the 2 weakest episodes in my opinion. And Herm is definitely the worst one. I mean, there might be somebody who disagrees and they have their Einstein level IQ, and they can explain to me why I'm wrong and why Herm is actually a masterpiece. And maybe they'll also explain that, you know, maybe this is actually the worst episode. But to me, you know, I only think that there's 2 meh episodes, but it's definitely these 2. But yeah, overall, I really like Invincible as a series. I actually think it's, you know, it hasn't run as long as The Boys has. So I'd be comparing 4 seasons to 5 seasons. But comparing what we've gotten so far, I definitely think Invincible has been more consistent than The Boys. Maybe The Boys had some higher highs, but it also definitely had some lower lows. Looking at you, season 4 finale of The Boys. Ugh. I just got a gross taste in my mouth just mentioning it. Yuck. But all right, that's going to be it for this ranking tier list video. Again, once more, I'm going to mention my briefly mention my Kickstarter. Again, it's only got 37 hours to go. A copy only costs $1. It is Kickstarter exclusive, which means once the Kickstarter ends, you will not be able to get this product. So if you're interested in getting RPG that's only $1, I highly recommend it. And maybe you're not interested. Maybe you just want to support me as a creator. You know, I'd appreciate that as well. But if not that, I mean, you can also like the video. You can subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Kind of motivates me to create more content and whatnot. And so with that being said, you know, I hope you enjoyed the video. And definitely have a good day. Have a good life. And most importantly, stay safe. Because remember, Thrag is out there. And if you piss him off, oh, I would not want to be you.